All right, we are checking out Tract 3 at the White River. Uh, Very special tract, one of the closest to the water for sure. Also, one of the tracks with better access than most. We were talking, just a few of us in the office here that are familiar with the tracks at the White River, and really it's tracks. There's about 36 tracks. You can't go wrong with any of them. I mean, the area, the hunting, the recreation, the proximity to the White River itself is fantastic. The privacy, the timber, all that stuff is great. But as far as tracks 1 through 6, they probably have the best access and the best access to the river as well. And so, this being one of those tracks, kind of puts you in the driver's seat. So track 3 is especially nice, and when we look at it here, good dimensions. It's about 10 acres in size. Excuse me. So about 330 feet east to west by about 1320 north to south, or about a quarter mile north to south. So really pretty standard size for a 10-acre property, which is nice to see. It's not exceptionally long and thin or anything like that. It's got access. As you look at this map, the green line is going to be the county road, and the purple lines are going to be the existing easement roads, which have actually probably been there as long or longer than the county road. So once we look at the topography of Tract 3, you'll see why it's so nice to have both of those roads giving you access to the property. I mean, it just works out really nicely. As you come to the property, you'll be coming in from the east, so from the right, I guess, over here. And you can look at the other maps and whatnot to get the directions. I think we laid that out pretty well. But again, this green road, it's called Lock 3 or Lock 3rd Road. It's actually the county road, but the last house is, so you'll get out here, you'll come within the development essentially, and you'll be on track 6, and you'll see a kind of a large yard and a little house kind of set back in the trees, and that's the last residence out here. So the county really only worries about maintaining the road up to about that house. So when you get beyond that, it's still county road, but I mean, it starts to get pretty rough. You got some spots where, you absolutely have to have a 4-wheel drive truck or SUV. That's all we drive. So, I mean, anytime we've been out here, we've been in a truck or SUV. I don't know that we've ever needed 4-wheel drive, but we have used it a couple times. So it just, the road does get rough. You got to go slowly. That's just what it is. Now, that's not to say that if someone were to build another residence, or a couple of people talk to the county, that they wouldn't change that up. And I would think at some point they would want to, because they want people to be able to get to their properties on the county road. But at this point, it's just a deal where the county's basically decided, hey, we're not going to go and grade this road, 3, 4, whatever times a year for no reason, because nobody's really out there using it. So that's what's going on with that. The road itself gets you through tracks 6 through 1, and then takes you to, if you look at this cleared area here, that's actually a power line that runs to the hydroelectric dam. So if we zoom out a little bit, you can see this dam. So that's the dam, and this over here on the right is the actual, what's called a lock. So if you're familiar with those, it's what you'll see in canals that has the big steel doors that they can shut on both ends, and so a large boat can go up and down river without having to traverse the dam. So I mean, if you've seen photos of like the Panama Canal or any canals, it's a system of locks basically, and this is just one lock. So there are 3 of these dams and locks within the White River, starting from Batesville and going upriver 1, 2, 3, and this is the 3rd one. So hence the name for that county road, which is Lock 3 Road or Lock 3rd Road, because that's generally what the county would use if they were, accessing the east side of that dam and lock. Excuse me. So going back to this, if we wanted to get to the rest of the properties, then we would let's do this. If we wanted to get to the river, we'd cross over the open part, and I guess you'd have to look up to see the power line, but you'll see the kind of the open field, so it's a good landmark. And as soon as you get through that, you'll see a Y in the road. If you go to the right, you go just a short distance and you'll be at the White River itself. This straight line here looks like a road, but what that is train tracks. So this is one of the very few spots that we've ever seen on the White River where there is actually a good trestle or tunnel or whatever you want to say going under the tracks. So it's concrete, it's wide, the concrete extends right out into the river. And the reason for that, we found out recently, is way back in the 1800s, that was the ferry crossing for the area. So right there was the ferry crossing. When they were putting in the tracks, of course, the railroads had no interest in building tunnels or trestles because the cost was quite a bit. But in this case, with the existing ferry landing, they didn't have a choice because people still had to be able to use that ferry to come and go. And it actually benefited the railroad too, because people on the west side of the river could get their goods across to the east side and then ultimately onto the trains for hauling the goods and whatnot. So that happens to be why that access point exists, why it's very rare, and why it's very cool. So to get to the other tracks is where I was going before. You would actually go left at the Y, you go up a hill, and then there's going to be a gate up at the top. Go through the gate and go up another hill, and then you're getting into tracks 9, 10, 11, etc., etc. So still definitely doable, but that's why we say tracks 1 through 6 really have, if not better access, then quicker access. I mean, you're gonna get to those first, which is kind of cool. If you keep going on the county road, if you miss the gate, if you don't see that and keep going, eventually you're likely to get to the spot that we got to where the road was just washed out and you couldn't get through. So otherwise, Lock 3 Road does continue and loops on back to Kelly Road, which is what it comes off of in the first place. But when we tried to do it, it was not passable. It was literally washed out. You couldn't get across it in a vehicle. So since it's quicker to come in from the north anyway, we just have not gone that south way since. So we recommend that you do the same unless you've heard something different. So track 3, if we zoom in on that, and we'll do that, I think we mentioned already, heavily wooded. You're going to find all different types of timber out here, mostly hardwood more than likely, but you're going to have some cedar. I think track 3, maybe track 3 and 4 are some of the only tracks where we saw pine trees, so that was cool. And that was more up toward the north side. But let's go to a topo map. There we go. Okay, so if you're familiar with topos, this makes some sense. If not, this looks pretty weird. Even if you are familiar with topos, this looks pretty interesting because it's really a pretty unique property. The black line you see, that's going to be the county road. So that's going to go right where our green line goes, essentially. The big thing about topos is you've got the contour lines, which are showing you changes in elevation. So on this map, like many of the maps, the elevation change between two contour lines is 20 feet. So essentially, if you have contour lines very close, a property's steeper. If you've got them much further apart, a property's flatter. So, if that's even a word, property's more flat. So on track 3, for instance, if we look south of the county road, you're going a long ways before you see any contour lines. So that's showing us that, it's fairly level. It's probably not perfectly level because it's got to change 20 feet really before the contour line picks it up. But going to be a pretty level area here. The blue line is the center of the creek bed, or what the topo map thinks is the center of the creek bed. It's going to be a wet weather creek, and some of these smaller creeks, the center line seems to shift around a bit over the decades, but that'll give you a pretty good idea. The creek bed would be the low point on the property, and then at the extreme southeast corner, it looks like it does start to rise up. What's interesting is, if you look at these little kind of sideways V's, those are 3 separate small valleys that come down from adjoining properties onto this property. So if you're looking for a property that may have some kind of live spring or something like that, this would be a good one to check into. Basically, all these springs all these little creeks are more or less spring fed. So even though this one is not a year-round creek as far as we know, there could certainly be some kind of little spring in there that drips or runs throughout the year. Also, if you want to check for caves on a property, that's a good place to start, is in those little natural valleys like that adjacent to creek beds. Going to the other side of the county road, we have a different deal. So remember how we said when the topo lines are close, a property's steep? Well, this is steep. So zooming in on this, if we just count the lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I don't know if I mentioned this, the only reason for the darkened lines, there's nothing specifically special about those other than every fifth line is a darkened line. And then that makes it easy to see 100-foot changes. So if we go to the east to tract 4, for instance, and you go from this darkened line on tract 4 to the darkened line toward the top, you know that's a 100-foot elevation change without having to count 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. So going back to tract 3, from the county road, 1 to 80, 100. I mean, it rises up pretty steeply. It rises up 120 or 140 feet within just a 300 or 400-foot range or less than that. And so that may not be a bluff, and it's probably not, although I guess it could be. It may not be a bluff, but it's really steep. So if that were somewhere where you wanted to create a road or a driveway, I mean, it could be done, but you'd have to have a pretty good-sized dozer and someone who's pretty good at running that pretty good-sized dozer and quite a bit of time to do so, because you could be anywhere from, 2 or 3 days to 2 or 3 weeks to get some kind of road or trail up there. And if you're paying for a pretty big dozer, that runs into a lot of money, because those can easily be a couple $100 an hour or more, depending on who's running them and how big it is. So that's the bonus on this tract 3, is because you've got that existing road that comes up through there, that purple road, you've actually got immediate access to the north part of that property without having to do any kind of road or driveway. And actually where that road comes in is where tract 3 is actually naturally starting to level off. So if we look at that and now look at this north part, and we've got some actual spacing between these contour lines. So it might not be perfectly flat, but it is a lot more flat than the rest of it. And if you were to go out there and explore on foot, when we see this kind of spacing, odds are that you've got some level areas combined with some sloping areas when you have that kind of spacing on those contour lines. So you'd have to really go and physically look at it to know for sure. But if there's no flat areas up there, then there's probably some that are very nearly flat, and they could be potentially really nice sites for building or camping. As you keep going north, interestingly enough, it slopes down again and actually picks up a tiny bit of another creek bed on its extreme northwest side. So you kind of got it all on tract 3 here. From the north side, you can use that existing easement road to get to the better parts of the property or the more level parts of the property. Potentially, you could still be extremely private by taking the easement road and then going off a couple 100 feet here. With the property being heavily wooded, as soon as you get even 100 feet off of the road, if that, no one's going to see you and you won't see them. And again, the purple roads out here are not public roadways, so they're going to be extremely low usage roadways. And it's not the kind of deal where it's, someone can come and meander around your property. It's like any road. They can use it to cross over to their property. They can't, stop and linger and goof off. We've never had any issues with it. It's just a big bonus to have, especially on a property like this where you otherwise simply wouldn't have access to that north part. So the thing that you might probably want to do is go to the listing page for the property, find the interactive map, which is going to be very similar to this one. In fact, it'll be likely nearly identical, except that it might not show the dimensions specifically for tract 3, because the interactive map we use is probably more or less this map without any specific tract singled out. They'll all be marked, but it'll be, you know, the same interactive map in all the listing pages, just for ease of use. So you can do that. You can switch the base maps. It's fun because you can cycle through and actually, depending on which base map you choose, and we've got the paid version where it's going to have some more options, but even in the free version, it should have what's basically a Google aerial, which is like this one. It'll have a topo or 2 topo maps. It'll have different satellite maps, which are kind of similar to Google aerials, except oftentimes they'll show the property at different times of the year. That's just kind of a lower resolution map, I think. And that's going to be like a late summer map, I would guess. Infrared is kind of cool. It's got limited usage. We use infrared mainly to see trails and natural openings on properties, because the infrared tends to show pretty well for that. What else do we have? Let's see what this is. Okay, so that's a middle of the winter time, and that can be interesting too, because you get to see it with all the leaves off the trees. And there's quite a bit of timber on this one. I mean, that's pretty interesting. And you can just kind of cycle through and zoom in and get a good look at it. But yeah, awesome tract. We love this project. Being that close to the White River for fishing or swimming or canoeing is fantastic. And even if that's, you know, not your bag, we've got the white-tailed deer and turkey population out here, which is great. Even just the natural area. I mean, the more we research this area, the more cool stuff we discover. We thought we knew everything about the Batesville, Arkansas area, and then we just recently discovered that right by Batesville, there are some ancient petroglyphs, kind of where whoever, a couple thousand years ago, would draw the different animals on the rocks and in caves and stuff. They've discovered those in several different sites around the area, which is pretty sweet. Some Civil War history, just a lot of really cool stuff going on. So we're excited about this one. We're excited about all the tracks. Track 3 is probably kind of extra special. So check out the rest of the listing, check out the videos, check out the maps, check out the pictures. If you have any questions, just give us a shout. We would love to talk to you about this property.